Gladiator battles against animals were never popular among the known species of the galaxy, not because they were illegal or seen as barbaric, which they of course were, but because most of the known species of the galaxy were herbivores that had dealt with the dangerous animals of their homeworlds by either scaring them of or by simply avoiding their territories, and as such the entire thing of killing a dangerous animal by yourself to prove how tough you are never really existed for them. But there were of course some exceptions to that rule, which were, in this case, the so-called Deathworlders, and they were unsurprisingly more often than not either carnivores or omnivores from some of the harsher planets the universe had to offer that were often referred to as Deathworlds. And thanks to the harshness of their homeworld, they were quite a bit tougher than their non-Deathworld counterparts, which was something the Deathworlders were rather proud of, and so it was only a matter of time until someone asked the question, which Deathworld species is the strongest? This, of course, quickly became one of the most, if not the most hotly debated questions among the Deathworlders, to the point that things got regularly so heated that fights broke out. But of course, things got only more heated the more time went, onto the point that arenas, where Deathworlders fought animals from other Deathworlds to prove their species was the strongest, kept popping out the woodwork with such frequency that the government of the Galactic Union had to get involved before things got even worse. And believe it or not, they succeeded by simply changing the question from who is the strongest to who is the toughest, which of course quickly became just as hotly debated as the first question, if not even more so, making some worry that it would get just as bad as the last time. But those worries were somewhat put to rest once the Deathworlders started to hold competitions of who could drink the most alcohol or eat the spiciest food, though most didn't understand why the change occurred. The answer to which was simply that the question had changed from who could punch the hardest to who could take the most hits, or in this case, who had the highest tolerance. These competitions quickly became rather popular, so the Galactic Union began to back them, making them grow ever more popular over the years, while behind the scenes they cracked down at the gladiator arenas, and just like that, peace had been restored. But that all changed when humanity was discovered, for they were so tough and strong that it bordered on the freakish even by the standards of the other Deathworlders, to the point that the Deathworlders that humanity had discovered viewed them as the undisputable alpha of all species in the galaxy. So of course they dominated every competition they took part in, and none could defeat them in combat. This, of course, wounded the Deathworlders' pride quite a bit, especially when the humans started to say that no animal was tougher or stronger than the ones from their homeworld, and of course none doubted that. However, that gave the other Deathworlders the idea that if the animals from the human homeworld truly were the biggest and baddest the universe had to offer, then whoever could beat the most dangerous of them was the strongest species around, next to humanity, of course. So they visited the human capital planet and asked for the most dangerous animal they had to offer, only to be shot down in no uncertain terms. This rather confused the Deathworlders, so they tried over and over again, only to be shot down every time. Until today, after years of non-stop begging, as well as a lot of goading, the humans finally relented under the condition that the fight wouldn't be to the death, as well as organized by humans, and would take part on a human-controlled planet. And that was all Nort had managed to get out of his human friend Alex before he had dragged him to the next shuttle to the planet the match was taking place on. Which was odd to say the least, so Nort asked him, "Why are you so excited for something as savage as this bloodbath of a match on the way over?" "Because they are going to bring an animal from the cradle, and come on, dude. Do you really think we would have agreed to this if we weren't sure we could prevent it from turning into a bloodbath?" Alex said in return, still as excited as when he had first heard about this match. Which certainly explained things, for you see the human homeworld had many names, like the Cradle, Gaia, Terra, Earth, or simply Home, because to the humans it had somewhat become a place of myth and mystery, for the simple reason that no human had set foot on its surface ever since they had managed to colonize worlds outside their home system almost 200 years ago. Because of that, none of the humans had seen one of the animals of their home world in person ever since then, even though they had the genetic material to clone them, because any one species could ruin the ecosystem on all human colonies, so they never cloned any of their animals to avoid this from happening, to the point that not even zoos had even one of these animals. That being said, it was still weird how excited Alex was, and when asked about it, he only said, "It's just cool to experience." What it might have been like watching the gladiatorial matches in the Colosseum back in ancient Rome. Oh, and before you say anything, the gladiatorial matches weren't as bloody as the movies might have you believe. After all, gladiators were rather expensive to train up, and none wanted to lose their investment. Also, the animal fights were more like hunts, though we both know that this match won't be like that, and apparently there they also held circus-like animal show in the Colosseum. So yeah, this will be way less bloody than you think. Which certainly explained things, and so, with all of Nort's questions answered, they both fell silent as their shuttle approached the transport ring that would take them to their destination. Which took quite a while since the ring was on the very edge of the system, but once they were through, they immediately found themselves at the edge of a 3-planet system, light years from where they had set off. Then the shuttle headed towards the second planet, an agri-world called New Kansas, which was one of the many agri-worlds that produced the food to feed the ever-growing human galactic nation. Because of this, the entire surface of the planet was pretty much entirely covered by farmland, and it only really had one big city, just like many other agri-worlds, which was where the shuttle was heading towards. And once they arrived, it was only a short walk from the shuttle station to the stadium the match was taking place in. The stadium was a lot bigger than Nort had expected it to be since, despite its importance, New Kansas was a bit of a backwater planet in the middle of nowhere, to the point that it was the biggest building in New Kansas's only city, funnily enough. But apparently the people of New Kansas took sports very seriously, so the stadium was almost bigger than the biggest one Norty had seen on the human capital world, and it quickly became apparent that they were clearly not the only ones interested in the match, as they noticed the many aliens and humans that were heading to the stadium as well, to the point that it was obvious that the stadium would be packed. Which turned out to be the case when Alex and Nort managed to get to their seats, that Alex had thankfully reserved in advance since Nort wasn't sure they would have gotten seats if he hadn't done that, seeing as seemingly almost all seats were already taken when they got to theirs. Anyways, the stadium was seemingly a soccer stadium that had seemingly been modified to allow as many sports as possible to be played inside of it. Though clearly none had ever imagined that it would one day be used as an arena for a gladiatorial match between aliens and an animal from their home world, so their safety measures were somewhat improvised, to say the least. But despite their improvised nature, the human had clearly spared no expense to make the match as safe as possible, seeing as how they had set up more than 4 dozen force shield generators to create multiple layers of force shields, as well as rather gigantic metal spikes between the field and the crowd. This seemed like a bit of overkill to Nort, even for the most dangerous animals Alex had told him about, but he knew better than to question the human about it, because he knew that his friend would just shrug and say, "Better safe than sorry," in response. So he kept his mouth shut and waited for the start of the match, which came just a few minutes after they had sat down way sooner than Nort had expected. The humans clearly wanted to get this thing over with as soon as possible as they herded the 4 alien gladiators into the stadium. The gladiators were piloting 3-meter-tall headless mech suits, not only to Nort's surprise, but clearly the gladiators as well, causing them to just awkwardly stand where they had been left by the humans. Then a suit-wearing human atop a metal disc floated into the middle of the arena, where he put a microphone to his mouth and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first and last match to determine who is the biggest and the baddest around. Our dear Deathworlder friends here, or an animal from the cradle itself," as he gestured at an absolutely massive metal animal transport box that was just now being lowered into the arena by a crane through a hole in the stadium's retractable roof. Nort couldn't help but stare at the box as it was lowered to the floor of the stadium, because he knew of no animal of the human homeworld that needed a more than 4 meters tall and more than 13 meters long transport box to be transported. But before he could ask Alex about it, the announcer said, "Now I don't believe that our Deathworlder friends here need any introductions because we all know who they are. However, their opponent does, for it is none other than the apex predator of the Cretaceous period, who upon being first discovered was given a name, meaning Tyrant Lizard King, because from just its bones one could tell that it had been the largest and most dominant predator of its time, weighing in at 6 tons of pure muscle and teeths. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Tyrannosaurus Roar, as the transport box opened and a massive, upright walking lizard stepped out of it to the roaring applause of the human crowd. This was unsurprisingly absolutely not what Nort had expected, so he couldn't help but stare at the animal that should have gone extinct more than 65 million years ago for a few seconds as it looked around the stadium before he turned to Alex and asked, "How is this possible the dinosaurs have been extinct for millions of years?" Completely dumbfounded, Alex just shrugged in response and said, "You remember the movie about a rich guy using cloning to build a theme park full of dinosaurs? That is essentially what happened. Some rich dude cloned some dinosaurs for his theme park on an artificial island. Honestly, he probably got the idea from that movie, which is probably why this T-Rex looks like the one in that movie. Anyways, he managed to finish the theme park, but just a few years later we left the cradle, so he freed the dinosaurs since none of them could fly or swim far enough to get off the island," causing Nort to just stare at him open-mouthed. But before he could say anything, the T-Rex roared at the human crowd, causing him to nearly jump out of his seat in sheer fright. However, that only made the humans more excited and shout even louder, which of course then made the T-Rex roar at them once more. Nort couldn't help but chuckle at the absolutely ridiculous sight of a dinosaur and a crowd of humans yelling at each other seemingly for no other reason than to see who could yell the loudest, though it was rather obvious that only the humans were enjoying this little exchange since they knew that they were safe behind the force shield. The T-Rex, however, clearly saw the roar of the crowd as a challenge, and when its own roar didn't silence the crowd, it let out a sound that Nort had only ever heard alligators or crocodiles make before it walked towards the crowd. But before it get too close to the crowd, it walked headfirst into the first layer of force shields, causing it to stagger back a few steps and shake its head before it stared utterly confused at the air in front of it that it had just walked into, causing multiple people in the crowd the chuckle. And Nort couldn't really blame them, because seeing a scaled brute of a theropod dinosaur, straight out of the movies, act like a dog that had just run into a glass door for the first time in its life was just too funny. Despite that, he suppressed his own chuckle, even when the T-Rex walked into the force shield for a second time, making the shield visible to the naked eye for a split second as it dispersed the impact of a 6-ton dinosaur walking into it across its surface. Now clearly angered, the T-Rex roared at the force shield before ramming it with its giant head. This somewhat predictably achieved little more than making the T-Rex stagger back while shaking its head once more and causing some of the humans to let out yelps of surprise. This, of course, only made the T-Rex even madder, causing it to roar even louder at the force shield, and because of that, it didn't notice the gladiator that was sneaking ever closer towards it. And once he was close enough, he charged towards the T-Rex and punched it in the right side of its head right below its eye. Now he probably expected the blow to cause the T-Rex to stagger to the side, giving him an opening to pummel the dinosaur with blow after blow. However, that's not what happened instead. The punch only pushed the T-Rex's head a bit to the left, seemingly doing so little damage that it took the dinosaur a moment to even notice that it had been attacked. And once it did, it turned it head to face its aggressor, causing the gladiator to stumble back a few steps in sheer terror, and this little sign of weakness was all it took to seemingly convince the T-Rex that this was a fight it could win. So it rounded on the gladiator and bit down on the mecha suit arm, causing the gladiator scream out in terror as it bit straight through the mech suit's armor. Though that didn't really surprise Nort or the human crowd all that much, because the Galactic Union was somewhat infamous for using rather thin sheets of tin, of all things, as armor for their mecha suits and vehicles, to the point that there were rumors that the Galactic Union had some ultra-light mech suits made of ceramics and plastic. Apparently the reason for that was that pretty much all armed conflicts in the known galaxy had until now been conflicts of speed and quantity, thanks to 95% of the known species in the galaxy being insectoids with absolutely massive populations, so swarm tactics had seemingly come rather natural to them. And because of that, the militaries of the known galaxy favored equipment that was not only tough and reliable, while being easy to both repair as well as maintain, but also easily replaceable. And since tin was one of the most common metals in the galaxy, that was not only light enough that even foot soldiers could wear it without any issue, but also tough enough to offer some protection. Thanks to pretty much all armies in the known galaxy using rather low-powered laser rifles to kill one another, though more powerful weapons were becoming more common ever since humanity was discovered and was rather easy to work with. It was widely used in militaries across the galaxy. However, when it came to humanity, or seemingly anything else from their home world, tin was quite clearly way too weak of a metal to offer any real protection, much to the chagrin of the gladiator as he punched the T-Rex's snout to make it let go. This, however, only made the T-Rex madder, causing it to yank on the mech suit's arm and ripping it off in one fell swoop with terrifying ease, the force of it making the gladiator fall over straight onto his front. The T-Rex shook the liberated. Barm like a dog would his toy for a moment as the gladiator pushed the mech suit up with its remaining arm. But before he could get further up, the T-Rex let go of the arm and put one of its 3-toed feet onto the mech suit's back, pushing it into the ground with its sheer weight. Then the T-Rex bit into the top of the cockpit, which was built into the headless torso of the mech suit, causing the gladiator to scream out in terror once more as the T-Rex's teeth pierced the mech suit's cockpit window. But before the T-Rex could crush the cockpit, with its sheer bite force, a round drone roughly the size of a beach ball detached itself from its casing in the stadium's roof and then quickly flew in front of one of the T-Rex's eyes, where it then shone an absolutely blinding light from a round lens in its center, straight into its eye, and let out a nearly deafening sound in its best imitation of a damned flashbang, causing the T-Rex to let go of the gladiator as it flinched back. Then an opening in the force shield close to the gladiator appeared, and 2 humans in mech suits quickly got him out of there before the T-Rex could recover. Meanwhile, the other 3 gladiators just stood there clearly, way too shocked by what had happened to move. But when the T-Rex began to visibly recover, the gladiators quickly rushed it before it could fully recover, raining down blow after blow as one of them threw their mech suit's arms around the T-Rex neck to hold it in place. And for a moment it actually looked like they were winning, but then the T-Rex bit into the thigh of one of mech's suit that was holding onto its throat, and then yanked on it, ripping the entire limb of with the same ease it had the other's arm, causing the mech suit to fall onto its back and let go of the T-Rex's neck in the process. Seeing this, one of the remaining gladiators tried to grab the T-Rex's neck, but it dodged the attempt and rammed its head into the mech suit's side, sending it crashing to the floor, its side armor visibly dented. Desperate now, the last gladiator tried to throw the T-Rex off his feet by ramming it with his mech suit, but that only made the T-Rex stagger to the side a bit before it turned its full attention to the last gladiator, who, to his credit, immediately tried to punch it in the face, but the T-Rex just opened its mouth and caught the blow before ripping the gladiator's mech suit arm off for his troubles, causing him to fall down just like the first gladiator had. Then the T-Rex immediately bit into the mech suit's cockpit, causing the drone to come back and flashbang it again, so that the human mech suit pilots could save him as well as the gladiator, whose mech suit had lost a leg, leaving the T-Rex had rammed the last one standing, who as soon as he got up again charged the T-Rex once more before it could recover from the flashbang to jump onto its back and wrap his mech suit's arm around its neck, seemingly in an attempt to choke the dinosaur out, causing the T-Rex roar in anger once more as it tried to shake the gladiator off its back, much to the enjoyment of the human crowd. And once more, Nort couldn't blame them, because watching an alien in a mech suit desperately cling to the back of a motherfucking T-Rex to not get thrown off was just too ridiculous of a rodeo scenario not to be funny. But of course the fun didn't last too long, as eventually the T-Rex threw itself against the force shield in an attempt to get the gladiator of its back, damaging one of his mech suit's arms in the process, after which the gladiator quickly fell off the T-Rex, back at which point it was rather clear that he could not win. Despite that, the gladiator got up and kicked the T-Rex in the face, but none could tell if it had done any damage at all, though that didn't stop the gladiator from trying once more, only for the T-Rex to catch the attack in its mouth. After which it ripped the mech suit's leg off just like the others, causing the mech suit to fall over and the T-Rex to pounce on it to bite into the cockpit, at which point Nort expected the drone to show up again. But instead, the sound of a bell echoed through the stadium, causing the T-Rex's head to shoot up and turn towards the source of the sound, a human holding up a red flare, giving the human mech suit pilots enough of an opening to get the gladiator behind the force shield with a long hook, though not without having to play tug-of-war with the T-Rex for him. A game they only won because the T-Rex ripped the gladiator's mech suit's last leg off, causing it to once more roar at the force shield before ramming it once more. But then the bell sounded once more, causing the T-Rex to turn to the human and just stare at him for a moment before the human ran towards the transport box as quickly as he could, causing the T-Rex to give chase out of sheer instinct, which was clearly what the human had planned for, because he was close enough to the transport box so that the T-Rex only caught up to him a meter or two in front of the box, and once it did, threw a rather large flashbang directly at the T-Rex. Rex's face before jumping to the side mere seconds after it went off. Now again, blinded, the T-Rex ran directly into the transport box, crashing into the back of it with a loud thump, and once it was inside the box, the door quickly closed behind, it by itself seemingly because a sensor inside had been tripped. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have an unexpected winner, the announcer said after he had landed his floating metal disc next to the human with the flare and raised the man's arm. This, of course, wasn't too well received neither by the alien crowd nor by the gladiators, who, as soon as they heard that, stormed onto the field demanding that the announcer revoked his decision. But the announcer only tilted his head to TJ's side and said, why would I do that? He beat the T-Rex fair and square. After all, this is why we left the transport box here so that you had another way to defeat it. Just none of you even considered that an option, causing the gladiators to stare at him for a moment as the alien crowd booed. Then they all yelled that they weren't told about that and that this was unfair. Was it now? Well then how? About this you all will fight me, and if you can beat me, I will revoke my decision. Causing the gladiators to stare at him for another moment before they agreed to his terms. Then they all walked into the middle of the stadium where two clearly visible trapdoors were built into the floor directly on the middle line, telling Nort that something was afoot, although the gladiators didn't seem to notice them. And once the two groups were standing a few meters apart, the announcer yelled, "Begin!" causing the gladiators to charge at him. But once they passed the middle line, the trapdoors opened, and two figures jumped out of them, quickly grabbing two of the gladiators each before pushing them to the ground with one hand like it was nothing. The gladiators, of course, tried to free themselves, but when they looked up and saw that they were being held down by lamias, they quickly gave up. And the reason for that was that while the lamias were seen as one of humanity's pet species and not as one of the civilized species because they had, technologically speaking, never made it past the Stone Age. But the were-tigers, as they were often referred to as well, thanks to looking like tigers with human-like faces that could walk on 2 or 4 legs, were known all across the galaxy for their brutal martial prowess to the point that many species in the Galactic Union had wanted to wipe them out. But humanity protected them simply because they knew that they were personality-wise more like big dogs than tigers, as well as the fact that they were one of the first species the humans had found that looked a lot like them. Because of this, many lamias served the humans as soldiers or bodyguards, earning themselves the moniker of pet species by many of the Galactic Union. The later role was probably why these two were here as bodyguards or just security, and they clearly took their job very seriously because they didn't leave the gladiators out of their sight for even a second. And with his opponents now dealt with, the announcer finally moved from his spot towards the cursing gladiators, then kneeled down and asked one of them, "Was that fair?" while holding the microphone to his mouth. "Of course not, you damned monkey!" the gladiator angrily replied, clearly trying to be as insulting as possible. But the announcer just ignored that part and asked, "But did I win?" Rather smugly as he gestured at the two lamias as if he wanted to ask the gladiator if he wanted to continue this fight. And while the gladiator didn't answer that question, that in and of itself was answer enough, especially when combined with the way his antennae dropped, so the announcer stood up and said, "I thought so. Now let me tell you something, friend. We humans are not that strong when you compare us to many animals on our dear homeworld or some of the death worlders we discovered. But we are smart, and that's how we dominated our homeworld as it's undisputed. Rulers not through our brawn, so never forget that being smart is part of being strong as well, even if some might call it unfair, and never forget who the boss around here is," saying the last part with such a cold menace in his voice that it sent a bit of a chill down Nort's spine and made it clear that humanity was not to be messed with. But as the announcer declared that the show was over, Nort couldn't help but say, "Man, you humans really are theater kids, aren't you?" half-jokingly causing Alex to laugh out loud before he said, "You love us and you know it. Enjoy another story. To all the others, I hope you enjoy this story." "You all right there, bud?" Alex asked for what felt like the 100th time to Nort. But he couldn't really blame him. After all, Nort had locked himself in his room, after what was from Alex's point of view a completely normal encounter with an annoying but harmless pest, only to emerge days later, looking like he hadn't slept in days, asking him to buy him a good device that could detect said pests, and then jumped onto the next spaceship, heading towards the nearest planet of the Galactic Union. So he could understand why his human friend had joined him. But it was still annoying that he viewed a demon that had possessed an old toy to try to steal Nort's soul as a mere pest. But he was glad that had come with him, because his human friend was rather good company to keep if you wanted to pass the time or avoid thinking about something. Although that wasn't always because of his winning personality, but simply because of how the passengers reacted to him. Just seeing an alien almost twice their size jumping out of the way as soon as he saw Alex was just funny and showed rather clearly what the kind of reputation humanity had in the Galactic Union. After all, they still often referred to humans as the laughing killers because of this reputation. Making it also quite useful when their ship had to deal with pirates, something the captain of their vessel knew all too well. So when a pirate ship appeared on their scanners, he immediately ordered that Alex as well as Nort be brought to the bridge, where Nort quickly learned that the only reason he was there was to act as Alex's translator, as well as his handler, nothing else. Thankfully, Alex had a very cunning plan to get rid of the pirates. So he asked them to hail the pirate ship, and as soon as the line was open, he yelled, "Oi, you runty gits, yous thinks yous hard as Zog and smash yous is will!" At which point the pirate ship quickly turned around to ran away, seemingly putting all their power into their engines to get away as fast as possible. This unsurprisingly caused the entire bridge crew to break into cheers, right until Alex said, so I guess ramming them is off the table now?" Making everyone on the bridge turn to stare at him because of how disappointed he sounded. The captain was the first one to recover his wits and said with a chuckle, "Good joke, sir," only for Alex to tilt his head to the side to say somewhat confused, "What do you mean?" Making the captain realize that he wasn't joking. Nort just chuckled as he shook his head because he knew that ramming was a legitimate strategy in the human space battle doctrine, to the point that even many civilian spaceship manufacturers had made sure that most, if not all, of their spaceships could employ this tactic. Although that wasn't something that they could do, so he just grabbed Alex and got them off the bridge before he could tell them more about human battle doctrine. That was thankfully the only speed bump on there, and just a day later they had reached their destination, planet 321. Yes, that was its name for. You see, the different species of the Galactic Union had one thing in common, that being that they valued names, so they only gave them to, for example, planets and people of great importance. All others were given numbers. Anyways, 321 was a relatively young colony world, but thanks to the planet being quite resource-rich, it had enjoyed a rather rapid growth compared to other less fortunate colonies. Thanks to that, it had quite a few decently sized cities on its surface and thusly quite the high population for a colony, making it the ideal place for Nort to find out if his hunch was right or not. Which was why they immediately, after getting to the surface and storing their luggage in a decent hotel they had found, went to one of the big marketplaces in the city, not only to test Nort's theory, but also to get some decent food into their stomachs, and after eating their fill, Nort asked Alex, "So did you bring it?" Alex only smiled and pulled out a pair of what looked like sunglasses out of their case that he had been carrying in his jacket before handing them to Nort. Nort simply looked at the sunglasses for a moment before he looked up and asked Alex, "Is this really it?" Alex gasped and put his hand on his chest before he said, "You honestly believe that I would do you dirty like that? I am hurt, sir, truly, truly hurt." Clearly not meaning a word of it, so Nort just rolled his eyes before asking, "All right, so how does it work?" Causing Alex to pout a bit before he answered, "You just have to put them on." Nort did as instructed, and as soon as he put on the glasses, they booted up, highlighting Alex in green. "Okay, so I guess green means you are not a demon, and red means you are a demon, right?" Nort asked. Alex simply nodded and said, "Yeah, pretty easy to understand, right? And that's not the only thing this baby can do. It has night vision, heat vision. You can zoom in, you can look through surfaces with this thing to check if something is in your walls. It also comes with a built-in translator. Cool, right?" Nort smiled widely and said, "Yeah, really cool. You, humans, really have the best tech." Meaning every word, because to him that was simply the truth. Alex just gave him a dismissive little wave and said with a bit of a Valley Girl accent, Stop it, you. Flattery will get you nowhere," before dropping it to casually ask, "Anyways, what's the plan, bud?" Like they were on holiday or something, which Nort of course could understand. After all, they were just here to investigate a hunch of his, and after that, just go home, because Nort still didn't know what to do if his suspicions turned out to be true. So he told Alex, "Now we just walk around the market for a bit." Alex raised an eyebrow at this answer, but then just shrugged and then said, "Sure, I wanted to look around a bit more anyways," before signaling the waiter that they wanted to pay. After doing that, they picked a random direction and began their little walk. They didn't meet a lot of people thanks to them being on the very edge of the quite large marketplace, all highlighted in green. As a matter of fact, the stalls, signs, and wares the merchants were selling were also highlighted in green, making it easy for Nort to notice the spot of red on one of said signs. The sign said "Fruit and Souls," causing Nort to stop in his tracks and stare at the sign for a moment before his attention was pulled away from it by a "What's up?" from Alex. Nort simply pointed at the sign and asked, "What does that sign say?" Alex looked at it for a moment before he said, "It says, fruits?" Sounding not too sure, which was weird. After all, Alex had had not only a translator, but also translator contact lenses that allowed him to read Galactic Union Standard. So why did he sound so unsure? Nort decided that this was a question for later and returned his attention to the sign, removing the glasses as he did, to answer the more important question to find that the sign only said fruits in Galactic Union Standard. But as soon as he put the glasses back on, it said fruit and souls again. Just in Latin now, thanks to the build-in translator, causing the same bad feeling in his gut that he first had when Alex told him about the demons, to return, and it only got worse when he looked at the wares, because while most of them were fruits of various kinds like advertised, some were what seemed to be little glowing white balls of gas package in a ball-shaped capsule. The owner of the stall was nowhere to be seen, so Nort walked towards the stall and picked up one of the capsules to inspect it, which turned out to be quite the weird experience, because his eyes told him that he was holding a capsule seemingly made of plastic or something like it, but it felt like he was holding an orange. Confused, he turned to Alex to ask him to hold the capsule, but stopped when he saw how intently he was staring at it. So instead, Nort asked, "What do you see?" Alex didn't answer immediately, and when he finally did, he only said, "I am not sure," causing Nort to tilt his head in confusion before he asked, "What do you mean you are not sure?" Alex seemed unsure how to answer, but after a moment he said, "I don't know. I just have this feeling that it is not what it seems to be. Sure, it looks like a fruit, but something tells me it is not. Get what I mean?" Nort simply nodded before he said, "Yeah, I get it. Anyways, let's look around a bit more," putting the capsule back before walking towards some more stalls that had spots of red on their signs. The first one he reached was another fruit stall manned by someone from an insectoid species that Nort didn't know the name of, and with how many insectoid species there were, he could be forgiven for that, who was highlighted in red and would have looked a lot like a fruit fly if Nort hadn't wore the glasses. He knew this because there were two more of the same species at the stall that were highlighted in green, giving Nort a good idea what the red highlighted one should have looked like. But instead, the red one looked like a more demonic version of the green ones with spiked carapace, claws, horns, and everything, making it quite clear to Nort that his hunch was right. Now the only question left was how bad was it? So they kept walking, searching for more of these red ones or possessed ones, and quickly found that they were far from common, but not exactly uncommon either. This absolutely terrified Nort, and why shouldn't it? This was a colony world. A big one, sure, but still a colony world. If there were this many people possessed by demons here, then how bad was it on more populated worlds? And if they had spread, so far it was more than likely that they had infiltrated the leadership of the Galactic Union, giving them an incredible amount of power. What made it worse was that the demons seemed to be able to replace their hosts without any problem whatsoever, making it clear that they had access to the host's memories, and that meant that without something like the glasses Nort wore, it was impossible to tell if someone was possessed by a demon or not, which made things quite more problematic, because if Nort revealed the existence of the demons to the population of the Galactic Union, the paranoia this news would create in the hearts of the people could lead to entire witch hunts. So Nort was rather unsure of how he should proceed, because he hadn't really thought about what he would do after his hunch was proven right or wrong, and more what it implied than anything else. But he didn't even get the chance to think about what he should do now, because Alex grabbed him and began to pull him towards the exit of the marketplace. Surprised, Nort looked at his friend's face to find him wearing a rather serious expression, causing him to ask, "What's wrong?" Alex put on a clearly fake smile, at least to Nort, before answering, "Act normal. There is someone following us." That certainly got Nort heart pumping, but he did his best to act calm despite that before asking, "So what is the plan? Alex just chuckled and then said, "That's what I wanted to ask you. After all, you are here to get some answers, right? So this is a good chance to get some answer." Nort couldn't deny that his human friend was right, but Alex's words also left him with a question that he just had to ask, and that was, are you sure it's a demon? Because he was the one wearing the device to detect demons, not Alex. Yet despite that, Alex answered quite confidently, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a demon." Confusing Nort enough that he asked, "How?" without thinking. Alex seemed to ponder that for a moment before he said, "I don't know, I just know," sounding just as confused as Nort. So Nort decided that this was another question for later and focused on the question of what they should do. But before he could come up with a plan, somebody behind them said, "Excuse me, my mammalian friends, might I have a moment of your time?" in Galactic Union Standard, and when Nort turned around, he found that the speaker was another one of the red highlighted fly-like aliens that they had seen manning the fruit stalls. "Depends on what you want from us," Nort simply replied, deciding that it was best to find out first what the demon wanted before they did anything. "Well, I couldn't help but notice how disappointed about the wares this market has to offer the two of you seem to be when you walk by. So I thought you might be interested in my wares. After all, I have the most exotic wares that you will find nowhere else on this entire planet." Jackpot. Nort couldn't help but think as he put on his best fake smile and said, "Oh, that sounds interesting, right, Alex?" as genuinely as he could. Alex, for his part, put on his best fake smile as well, and then said, "Yeah, it sure does, way more than the rest of this boring market," making the demon rub his first pair of hands together in a distinctly fly-like fashion before saying, "Excellent, excellent. Then if you would follow me. My shop is a bit of the beaten path, but not far from here." "Perfect," Nort thought before. He said, "Sure, lead the way," causing the demon to once more rub his hands together before turning around to lead them towards an alleyway not far from the edge of the market district. Normally that would have been cause for concern, but to Nort and Alex this was absolutely perfect, so they followed their demonic black market dealer friend into the alleyway with zero hesitation, something the demons seemed to appreciate. So they walked down the alleyway until they almost reached the end, where two dumpsters hid a door in the wall from prying eyes. The door led to another alley, but they could already see their destination at the end. It was an old one-story building. That was like many buildings in the Galactic Union, a plain gray block with the only thing that made it stick out from the other ones Nort had seen being the large old-school exhibition window that was filled to the brim with what looked to him like antiques, all of which were highlighted in red, and when he took of his glasses, they all suddenly looked brand new, or like they were of high quality. Intrigued, Nort followed the demon into the shop, where he found himself almost assaulted by the color. Red. Because literally anything in the room was highlighted red, since it was filled wall to wall with antiques and other wares, to the point where you could barely see the walls or the floor. So red was the only color, besides black, he could see. This unsurprisingly kinda hurt to look at. So Nort took the glasses off before he entered the shop with Alex in tow, who then began to walk around the shop checking out the antiques, plants, fruit, meat, books, hardcore porn mags, spices, and powders on display, while Nort walked towards the demon who now stood behind a counter with some display cases on it, filled with all sorts of jewelry as well as some weapons, before he said, "Damn, you weren't lying when you said you have the most exotic wares on the entire planet. Must have quite a few connections, huh?" The demon simply nodded and said, "Yes, I have quite a few friends across the Galactic Union more than happy to give me some of their wares at a price, of course." That last part got Alex's attention, causing him to walk towards the counter while asking, "While we are talking about prizes, what kind of payment do you accept?" The demon simply looked at Alex and then said, "I accept Galactic Union credits, but I am more than willing to trade my wares for something of equal value." Alex raised an eyebrow at that before he asked, "You mean like souls?" Surprisingly, the demon nodded at this and said, "Yes, like souls though, of course," before stopping after it realized what Alex had said and then just stared at him clearly shocked. Alex, for his part, smiled smugly before he said, "Want to know where I heard that from, huh? Sadly, we are the ones asking the questions here, not you." The demon simply laughed at this, clearly not taking them seriously. So Alex pulled a bottle of what Nort now knew was holy water out of his bag, and then splashed some of it on the demon's face. As soon as the holy water hit the demon's face, it howled in pain and then tried to swipe the bottle out of Alex's hand. But Alex simply moved his hand out of the way and then emptied the bottle over the demon's head. It howled once more, opening its mouth as much as it could, and then a being made entirely out of flames in the rough shape of a human, with 2 horns protruding from its head, emerged from the host's mouth. "You little shit! You think something like that can stop me? I'll make you suffer what I have 100 times over," the demon yelled, before it took a deep breath and then let out a loud scream. Nort managed to shield his ears just in time, but still the shock from the suddenness of the attack made him stumble back a few steps to the delight of the demon. But when the demon turned towards Alex, he let out a shocked, "Wait, what?" because Alex seemed to be utterly unfazed by his scream. Something that didn't surprise Nort after all the scream had been loud, but even through covered ears he knew that it was not enough to harm him, so there was no way it could do anything to Alex. In fact, the only thing Alex did to even acknowledge the scream was scratching one of his ears a bit, before he said, "Quite the set of lungs you got there." "Oh, you will work just fine." Utterly shocked, all the demon managed to get out was, I don't understand how did," before he realized what Alex had said and asked, "Wait, what do you mean with, I will work?" Seemingly a bit surprised by the question, Alex answered, "Oh, I was just thinking that with a few modifications you would make for a hella good set of bagpipes. Pun intended." Both Nort and the demon kinda just stared at Alex for a moment before the demon found its voice again to say, "Thanks, I guess, even though you are clearly joking." Though judging by Alex's facial expression, Nort knew that he wasn't. But the demon didn't seem to notice that and just said, "After all, I am a being from an alternate dimension, so you can neither touch nor harm me." But despite that, Alex just walked up to it, grabbed its shoulder to spin it around and inspected its back, before saying, "I'm gonna need some extra pipes, and then there is the matter of where I blow into," causing the demon to jump away with a yelp, before it now somewhat nervously said, You are quite the powerful opponent, aren't you? But that only means that you will make quite the powerful host," before it charged at Alex's mouth, shrinking itself down as it did so that it could force itself down his throat. It all happened so fast that Nort couldn't do anything to stop it, not that he could have done anything anyways even if he had seen it coming, leaving him no choice but to wait and hope that the demon really couldn't steal Alex's soul. But that hope nearly died when opened his mouth and said with the demon's voice, "Oh, I could get used to this. With this power, I will be unstoppable, ha 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 ha," before it seemingly tried to take a step forward, but found that Alex's body wouldn't move, causing it to say wait without thinking, before trying again only to get the same result as before, making it scream out, "Why won't you move?" in sheer confusion, clearly addressing Alex, who took back control of his body like it was as easy as breathing just to say, "Uh-oh, seems like someone got themselves trapped," causing the demon to shout, "How? What kind of monster even are you?" in pure confusion and panic, before trying once more to get Alex's body to move but failed miserably, forcing it to change its approach. Wait, we can talk about this. You can just let me out and we can just forget this ever happened." But Alex was clearly not listening, and instead started pulling more bottles of holy water out of his bag until he held 3 of them in each hand, causing the demon to ask, What are you doing?" But the only answer it got was Alex screaming, "Begone, foul demon!" And then he chugged all of the bottles at once. Thankfully for Nort, this drowned out the screams of the demon. He held little sympathy for it, but the sound of screams of pure agony weren't something that he would call pleasant, even if it didn't take long for the holy water to run out, at which point the demon left Alex's body and tried to run away. However, Alex didn't let it get away so easily, putting it into a chokehold almost immediately, before grabbing some pipes from one of the shelves, then jammed them into the body of the demon, and then actually used it as a set of bagpipes to play, a song from an old show about a samurai that had to get back to the past. The entire thing was more than unpleasant, because the original song was intentionally not good, but when there were actual screams and moans mixed into it, was bad on a whole different level, to the point where Nort had to cover his ears. This caused Alex to stop, but only to say, "By the look on your face, I can tell that you like the pipes, wee laddie," before he continued playing. Nort had to raise his hand and almost yell "stop" to get him to cease this torture. Then he walked up to the demon before he asked, "I guess you are ready to talk now, aren't you?" The demon quickly nodded before he said, "Yes, yes, just please no more." Nort just nodded, clearly satisfied by the answer, before he asked, "Good, how many of you are there in total?" The demon hesitated a moment before answering, "I don't know the exact number, but we roughly make up 2% of the Galactic Union's population." That answer sent a shiver down Nort's spine. Sure, it didn't sound like a lot, but 2% of uncounted billions was still a lot. But Nort knew that was something to worry about later. So instead he asked, "Have some of you infiltrated the Galactic Council, and if yes, how many exactly?" The demon had to think about that for a moment before he answered, "2, but I don't know their names." Sounding somewhat unsure, probably because it wasn't interested in politics, but Nort ignored that and moved on to the next question. "How much has your kind influenced the Galactic Union?" Once more, the demon hesitated before it rather nervously answered, "As far as I know, we have never influenced the Galactic Union." Nort just raised an eyebrow at that obvious lie, causing the demon to quickly add, Listen, we have feed on this cattle for untold thousands of years, if not millions of years, and in that entire time we never really had a reason to really influence them. After all, when we take over a host, we literally become them, so we live their lives like they would have, making it rather hard to tell if someone is possessed or not. So until you two came along, no one even knew we existed. Besides, every government the cattle has ever conceived has always kind of worked in our favor, and even if it hadn't or anything else happened that could threaten us, we can always just move on to better feeding grounds, and as long as we can eat, we are happy. Nort couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief as it became clear to him how somewhat simple-minded the demons seemed to be, or at least this one seemed to be. But still, he didn't like how confident it was that its species could escape anything that could threaten them. Sure, it could just be a lie, but seeing as how he was dealing with a demon from another dimension, it was rather safe to say that it wasn't lying. But if that really was the case, that they couldn't really be stopped, just chased of, Nort couldn't help but close his eyes and massage his temples as he was once more confronted with the same question again, that being, "So what now?" demanding pretty much all of his attention to the point that he almost didn't hear the demon say, "So, can I go now? Unless you got... Wait, what are you doing? Wait, nah..." Causing Nort to open his eyes to find the demon gone and Alex swallowing something. Both of them just stood there for a moment in pure shock until Nort managed to ask, "Did you just eat the demon?" Alex just nodded in reply. "Why?" Nort asked, utterly confused by his friend's behavior. "I don't know," Alex answered, just as confused as him, before a familiar white ball of gas forced its way out of Alex's mouth and then flew right into the mouth of the host body the demon had just left standing behind the counter like a zombie, causing life to return to its dead eyes. At first, the fly just kept touching his body before he said, "I'm free. Oh, by the Queen, I am free," jumping up and down in sheer happiness. Nort just let him have this moment of happiness for a bit before he asked, "Sorry for asking you this, but why did the demon keep you prisoner?" Causing the fly's attention to snap to him because it had seemingly forgotten they were there, so being suddenly addressed had frightened him. But after calming down, he answered, "Because it needed my memories to trick everybody into thinking he was me, and also because that way it could torture me whenever it felt peckish, since I was still in there, just couldn't do anything but watch. So thank you for freeing me from that hell." Nort just smiled and said, "You are welcome, though. What are you going to do now?" The fly pondered this for a moment before answering, "Well, I have no other choice than to run away, since the others will be able to tell that I am no longer on of them. So they might torture me to find out how I escaped, then probably just eat my soul." Nort couldn't help but feel sorry for the fly, but before he could offer his assistance, the door to the shop flew open, and another one of those fruit fly-like aliens waltzed in, hollering, "I runt you got some of the good stuff left?" At first, Nort just thought that this was just a rowdy customer here to get his fix. But when he looked at the fly behind the counter and saw blind panic in his eyes, he knew that it was another demon. However, before he could do anything, he felt a familiar hand touch his shoulder and heard Alex say, "Don't worry, I got this." Before he sprinted forwards as fast as he could, only stopping when he was right next to the demon. Then he turned to face Nort and said, "Hi, I am Alex. This is my show. I eat the demon. Said demon didn't even get a chance to react, before Alex somehow pulled him out of its host and the swallowed it whole so fast that all Nort saw of it was the head of the demon being crushed by Alex's jaws for a fraction of a second. Then it was over. Both Nort and the fly couldn't help but stare at Alex in pure horror before Nort managed to pull himself together enough to ask, "How did you do that?" Alex just put on the dumbest face he could before he answered, "I don't know," clearly trying to sound as dumb as possible as the soul of the other fly flew out of his mouth and into their body, causing Nort to just shake his head before he said, "I should have known." He then turned around and addressed both of the aliens. "All right, you two, you are in luck, because I know how to get some tickets for a ship heading towards what the Galactic Union calls human territory tomorrow. You know the place this demon-eating fellow is from, so you should be safe there, at least way more than if you stayed in the Union." Seemingly surprised by what Nort had said, both of the flies got on their knees and started to bow to him, thanking him as well as promising rewards all the while. But Nort simply waved them of and told them, "Just be at our hotel tomorrow morning and be on time or you will be left behind," before he headed towards the shop door with Alex in tow. Once outside, they both headed back towards their hotel. They didn't talk the entire way, but once they were in their room and Nort had sat down on one of the beds, Alex asked, "So what now?" Nort just sighed and then said, "I don't know," trying his best to imitate Alex back when he had eaten the demon, right in front of him. Alex just smiled at that and then said, "Well, I got a plan." Nort just raised an eyebrow at that before he asked, "Really, Alex, a cunning and subtle one?" Alex just smiled and said yes, causing Nort to ask, "As cunning as a fox who has just been appointed professor of cunning at Oxford University?" A smile slowly spreading across his face, mirrored by Alex as he answered, "Yep." Nort just shook his head as he said, "Well, it can't be worse than my plan to escape all this by pretending to be mad with all you humans around who would have even noticed another madman in your corner of the galaxy," causing both of them to laugh out loud at the absurdity of it all, after which Alex cleared his throat before giving Nort the sales pitch for his idea. "All right, we form a secret organization to hunt down the demons." Nort had expected something like that, because he knew Alex. So he just tried to give as little of a reaction as possible while signaling his friend to continue. "Okay, so first of all, finances. For that, we could probably go to the leaders of any of the human nations, or maybe all of them, since none of them probably want the Galactic Union to be controlled by demons from another dimension that feast on souls and suffering, even if they haven't influenced the Union yet. After all, just because they haven't done that yet doesn't mean that they won't do it if it benefits them. Besides that, I guess they would also like the manpower and knowledge the people we would have to get out of the Galactic Union would bring along. Also, I don't think we would have to worry about being discovered after all if the demons manage to trick everybody in the Galactic Union for this long, then I think we can pull it off too. Sure, the demons are another matter, but they have never been threatened by pretty much anything in thousands of years, especially not by someone that can tell who is possessed and who isn't, so we just have to hit them fast and hard enough before so that they can't react. Anyways, what do you think so far?" Nort thought about it for a moment. It was definitely not the best plan, but it definitely wasn't the worst either. So he just said, "Let's just tell your government about this. After all, if those two aliens show up, we have at least some witnesses, and then take it from there." Alex didn't seem too happy about this, but didn't argue, so Nort just had to tease him a bit, "What you wanted to play secret agent that much?" Which Alex countered by saying, "Oh, come on, you know you wanted to do the same." Nort couldn't deny that, so he just raised his hands in surrender and said, "You got me," before he put on the demon detection sunglasses Alex had given him and asked, "Anyways, Agent A, you want to go gather some more evidence in case our two witnesses are a no-show?" Which put a wide smile on Alex's face as he pulled a matching pair of sunglasses out of his backpack and said, "Sure, partner, lead the way." Then they both walked out of their hotel room and together towards an uncertain future. Thanks for diving into this story with me. Don't miss out on the next one. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think.